of a movie that was filmed in 2014 and was supposed to release in 2015, but production hell proved otherwise and it didn't come out until 2022. And then when it came out, it turned out to be the biggest box office bomb of the year, losing 20 times its budget. It's not anything you've heard of. It's not Morbius or Lightyear or anything like that. No. It's a little-known movie based on a sci-fi novel from the 90s entitled The King's Daughter. And in this video, you will learn how this movie went from being a surefire hit to one guy's passion project to a game at the worldwide box office to an absolute dumpster fire. Let's get into it. What is The King's Daughter? It is based on a sci-fi novel entitled The Moon and the Sun, written by American author Vonda M. McIntyre. This cross-genre mashup of sci-fi and historical romance was about King Louis XVI in 18th century France. His quest for immortality leads him to embark on a quest to capture and steal the life force of a mermaid. But his plan is complicated when his secret daughter, Marie, returns to the French royal court and discovers his secret. The Moon and the Sun was published in 1997 and was a hit among book critics, winning the Nebula Award for Best Sci-Fi Novel, and was also considered by Publishers Weekly as one of the best books of 1997. With the book gaining major amounts of praise, Hollywood film producers who wanted their next major hit quickly looked to The Moon and the Sun, including Michael London. Michael London was an experienced film producer in 1997. He was formerly the executive vice president of production at Fox Filmed Entertainment, and after he left that job, he was looking for his next big movie. After reading the Moon and the Sun novel, London was drawn to the book by its juxtaposition of fantasy and historical romance elements by adding a mermaid into historical France, and he pitched the movie to Jim Henson Production. Why Jim Henson, you may ask? While the production company might be more known for the Muppets, they also delved a bit into films not involving their iconic characters in the 80s and 90s with titles like The Dark Crystal. With their interest in fantasy, Jim Henson Productions took on the project. Theater director Christopher Renshaw was hired as the movie's director, and screenwriter Laura Harrington was going to write the script. With the crew in place, things looked like that they were going to go smoothly, but they did not. As fate had it, Jim Henson Productions, as it was known, ceased to exist. How did it implode, you may ask? Well, it had a deal with Sony to create movies. And once Sony got out of that deal, there wasn't any hope of Jim Henson Productions making this movie on their own. They needed help from a powerful mouse named Mickey. And then Bill Mechanic entered the picture. In 2000, he was the CEO of Fox Filmed Entertainment. He started this role at the company in 1994, and through his 6-year leadership, oversaw hit after hit. Die Hard with a Vengeance, Independence Day, Titanic. Need I say more? Things were looking good for this man, who was also involving himself in the production of The Moon and the Sun. However, another executive at Fox, Peter Chernin, fired Mechanic, leaving him with no options but to try and find another job. And he did. The year after Mechanic got fired, he scored an overall deal with Walt Disney Pictures, meaning that any movie he chooses to produce, Disney would be the studio behind it. And this man was so committed to The Moon and the Sun that he took it from when he worked on Jim Henson Productions and transferred it to Walt Disney Studios, thus giving the project a second life. And not only did he give it a second life, he cast an actress as the king's secret daughter. An up-and-coming movie star that was fresh off a certain prequel and would go on to a certain franchise about a certain hammer god. Natalie freaking Portman. This project was in peak momentum now. Disney was making it, Natalie Portman was starring in it, everything was going to go right once they started filming the movie in 2002. But that's the thing, they did not film the movie in 2002. No reports came about what happened to this version of the adaptation, but I have a simple theory. Natalie was simply too busy to film it. She had the rest of the Star Wars prequels. She had other movies not related to Star Wars, including Cold Mountain, Closer, and V for Vendetta. And she was only 22 years old. So yeah, Natalie wasn't playing the king's daughter anymore, and all hell broke loose. But Bill Mechanic has saved this movie before, when Jim Henson collapsed and he brought it to Disney. And he was determined as hell to get this movie made. Throughout the rest of the 2000s and early 2010s, Mechanic attached various talent to this project, only for them to drop out on him. Little information is there about what talent was there and at what time, but one source said that at one point, Daniel Radcliffe of Harry Potter fame was set to play a role. Unfortunately for Mechanic, this didn't materialize. He said in a 2014 interview that the film's reported budget was an issue for getting financing for the project. He said, "You can make a movie that costs $200 million, or you can make a movie that costs nothing. What you can't do is make a movie in between." It was also a struggle to find a shooting location that was affordable and looked like historical France. But after The Great Gatsby came out in 2013, a mechanic discovered that the production was actually shot in Australia and still looked like 1930s New York, he felt really good about it. In addition to this benefit, The Great Gatsby also got money back from the Australian government for filming the movie there. Inspired by The Great Gatsby's tactics, he decided to finally try and make The Moon and the Sun. But besides the production rebates, where the heck would Bill Mechanic find the money to get it made? The answer lies halfway across the world. At the end of 2009, James Cameron's Avatar was released worldwide, and it became the highest grossing movie of all time. While it was a major hit in the US, making over $700 million, the real secret to Avatar's record-breaking success lies in its success overseas, especially in China. When Avatar came to the most populous country in the entire world, people waited in lines every day to watch Avatar. They even camped out overnight just to get tickets to watch Avatar. The special effects and storyline resonated with Chinese moviegoers, and it ended up making over $200 million in the US there alone. This started a trend within the American film industry. American film producers wanted access to the Chinese market. However, the Chinese government had a strict quota on the amount of foreign films that they let into the country. But if Hollywood bypassed that rule by getting their movies funded by eager Chinese investors and production companies, then their profits would maximize, and they could be the next Avatar. With that knowledge, Bill Mechanic pitched the movies to several Chinese production companies. And not only did they accept, they accepted with rapturous enthusiasm. Kylin Films, led by an experienced producer in the Chinese industry named Peng Hong, gave the production over $20 million, the largest Chinese financial contribution to an independent movie and made in a foreign country. Other Chinese producers that invested in the movie include Evergrande Pictures, the film arm of a major property developer, Bliss Media, which produced Hacksaw Ridge, and Tiffany Mo, who was the manager of the most famous actress in China, Fan Bingbing. Fan Bingbing was a huge deal in 2014 China. In 2013, she was the highest paid celebrity in the entire country, and she starred in many Chinese movies that were both box office hits and won awards internationally. I think I told you about the whole mermaid in the center of this movie's story, where the king wants to steal her life force in order to live immortally. Well, in a coordinated 3D chess move to get a successful release in the Chinese market, guess who they cast as the mermaid? That's right, Fan Bingbing. Yes, a person was cast. And yes, thanks to Australian film rebates and Chinese financing, The Moon and the Sun was finally back on. In addition to fans casting as the mermaid, Pierce Brosnan, who was a former James Bond actor, was cast as Louis XVI, while Maze Runner star Kaya Scodelario was cast as his daughter. The movie was given a budget of $40 million and was slated to film in Victoria, Australia, with several outdoor shoots in Versailles, France. In addition to the Chinese producers, American companies Cosmo Filmed Entertainment and Lightstream Pictures, in addition to Bill Mechanic himself, were producing the movie, which Barry Behrman, who had no produced credits, and James Shamus, who produced Brokeback Mountain, wrote. Sean McNamara, who directed Soul Server, was the director, and with the cast and crew set, the movie finally had a studio. Focus Features, a label of Universal Pictures, was going to release it. The movie was filmed in 2014, and 4 months after it finished, a miracle happened. Paramount Pictures got the movie's distribution rights from Focus Features. Even better for the movie, they had a release date, April 10th, 2015. But as the release date got closer, there wasn't any marketing for the movie. No trailer, no poster, no nothing. It was like Paramount wasn't going to release the movie at all. During 2015, Paramount was in a bit of a funk. For unknown reasons, they picked up the rights to movies, only to drop them with a short time left before the release. A short year later, Paramount got rid of the animated movie The Little Prince a week before it was supposed to release, even with marketing intact. But The Moon and the Sun didn't even have marketing, so it made sense that they just canceled it without providing a new release date. A representative for the production claimed that the movie needed more time in post-production because test audiences didn't like the visual effects that they used on the mermaid. However, months passed, years passed, and there was still no sign of The Moon and the Sun coming out. But in 2017, 2 years after the movie was dropped by Paramount, Open Road Films, an indie studio owned by Regal and AMC, bought the rights to the movie and renamed it The King's Daughter. However, later that year, investor Donald Tang and his company Tang Media Partners bought the company from the movie theater chains after the studio failed to make many hit movies and formed the new company, Global Road Entertainment. But a short year later, Global Road Entertainment endured bankruptcy and sold the rights to all of its movies. By 2020, Australian company ArcLight Films was tasked to sell the movie and find an American distributor. But despite this resolve to find someone to show the movie, there was already a major problem concerning The King's Daughter's plan for world domination, one concerning its star Chinese actress. Even through The King's Daughter's long and troubled production history, Fan Bingbing was always a star. Her movies were making a lot of money, and she even went on to co-star my personal favorite X-Men movie, Days of Future Past. But in 2018, Fan's fortunes changed. On May 28th that year, TV anchor Sri Yongyuan exposed her for reporting to tax authorities that she was making 10 million yuan, equivalent to $1.4 for starring in the movie Cell Phone 2, when in reality she hid 50 million yuan away from her true 60 million yuan or $8.4 million salary. This caused her to be secretly imprisoned for 3 months, and even after the imprisonment, caused her image to be ruined at the time in China and caused problems for her career. The Chinese release of Bruce Willis' movie Airstrike, which Fan co-starred in, was cancelled. And the movie The 355, which also coincidentally bombed in US theaters the same month The King's Daughter did, had its Chinese release cancelled and its Chinese investors pulled out of the movie. Even though her public image improved in China after the midst of the scandal, it stained her relationship with the film industry forever. And at this point, it was clear that Bill Mechanic's original plan to get Chinese popularity for The King's Daughter wouldn't work. Miraculously, when ArcLight Studios shopped around the film with its original cast intact and the new addition of Julie Andrews as the narrator, a major studio, well, not really a major studio, a studio actually picked it up! Well, I didn't say major, I didn't say studio. It was actually nothing. The new owners of The King's Daughter were Grativas Ventures, an independent film company located in Ohio. Grativas Ventures doesn't have many credits to its name, but what it did have was access to over 2,000 theaters. So with barely any marketing that was overshadowed with the long history of its troubled production, on January 21st, 2022, Grativas Ventures finally released The King's Daughter. But just by the month they picked, you can tell it wasn't going to go well. Usually January is seen as a dumping month that put movies that don't have the full confidence of a studio out there. If it's releasing in January and if it's not Oscar bait and it's not horror or anime, chances are the movie's along with fellow box office bomb Redeeming Love, The King's Daughter was pushed into American theaters on January 21st. And by January 22nd, the signs were showing that this movie wasn't resonating with audiences or critics. The movie had a 20% rating on Rotten Tomatoes for critics and only 100 verified ratings for audiences, though the extremely small audience gave it an 80%. But more importantly, the movie only made $750,000 on its opening weekend and opened at a dismal 8th place. Movies that have been out for a month already, like Sing 2, No Way Home, and even The 355, did better than The King's Daughter. The next weekend, the movie dropped to 14th place and made $443,000. And in the third week, when movie theaters can contractually drop movies out of the theaters, 1,500 theaters pulled the movie, leaving only 426 theaters playing it and a dismal $65,000 to its run. It ended up grossing $1.7 million in America and didn't fare better internationally, with only $459,000. In conclusion, this was a flop. There were a lot of movies that flopped in 2022 that lost a lot of money, just like The King's Daughter. However, The King's Daughter, or The Moon and the Sun, is a very intriguing case because of its long, troubled production that lasted over 20 years, the intricacies that led to the long 7-year finished movie development hell, and of course, the fact that the producers invested $40 million into this dang movie, yet it only made 2. But thankfully for Bill Mechanic, the movie is out, and despite its total bombing, it can be streamed on Apple TV or wherever the heck movies can be bought. The story of The King's Daughter has been told. Now, Bill Mechanic can rest, or spend another 20 years in development hell with another movie. C'est la vie.